All right, we're picking up with Return of the King. Open your books to the first chapter, Minas Tirith, to page 753 at the bottom of the page. Gandalf is talking with Pippin, and he's warning Pippin about what he's going to experience when he meets Denethor, the Steward of Gondor, for the first time. And at the bottom of page 753, Gandalf tells Pippin that Denethor loved Boromir, but that perhaps he loved him too much. And he says to Pippin to make sure that he doesn't say anything about Aragorn. And Pippin doesn't understand why, and he asks, why not? What's wrong with Strider? And he says, he's going to be coming soon enough, isn't he? And Gandalf replies, maybe, he will. But then Gandalf goes on and talks about, but it's not very wise to talk about the future king when you're bringing news about the death of the son of the present steward. And Pippin's kind of amazed and says, kingship? And Gandalf, yes, if you have walked all these days with closed ears and mind asleep, wake up now. And what he means by that is not only if all your experiences on this journey thus far haven't opened your eyes to what is going on around you, then you'd better do so now, because he's walking into a very precarious situation with Denethor. So they go in and they meet, and Pippin speaks with Denethor, and Pippin says on the bottom of page 755 how Boromir died, and he talks about his gratitude towards Denethor. And then he says, at the bottom of page 755, little service, no doubt, will so great a lord of men think to find in a hobbit, a halfling from the northern shire. Yet such as it is, I will offer it in payment of my debt. And he pulls out the sword that he received from the Barrow at Fog on the Barrow Downs, and he lays it at Denethor's feet. And Denethor smiles and says, give me the weapon. And Pippin lifts it and gives it to Denethor. Pippin tells him where the weapon came from. And then Gandalf tells Pippin, if you're resolved to do this, take the hilt and speak after the Lord. And Pippin says, I am. And so he swears fealty to the Lord of Gondor. He doesn't swear it solely to Denethor. He swears it to the Lord of Gondor. So that should Denethor die, Pippin's loyalty will be to the next Lord of Gondor in a recurring and repeating kind of fashion. So, Denethor's first command as Pippin's lord is to tell him everything he can about Boromir's death. Okay? And so, Pippin does, or before Pippin does, Gandalf says, I have some things I would like to speak with you also about. And he says, I have not ridden hither from Isengard 150 leagues with the speed of wind only to bring you one small warrior, however courteous. Is it not to you that Theoden has fought a great battle, and that Isengard is overthrown, and that I have broken the staff of Saruman? Now that should be news, that Gandalf has broken the staff of Saruman, because prior to this, obviously, Gandalf was Gandalf the Grey, Saruman was Saruman the White. There was a hierarchy, and Saruman was at the top of it. The only ones who should know about Gandalf defeating Saruman were those who were present at that particular time. In other words, Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Merry, Pippin, Theoden, Eomer, and the Riders of the Rohirrim, and the few Ents that were in the area. And we get this wonderful description of Pippin looking at Gandalf and Saruman. And we're told on page 757, Denethor looked indeed much more like a great wizard than Gandalf did, more kingly, beautiful, and powerful, and older. And by sense other than sight, Pippin perceived that Gandalf had the greater power and the deeper wisdom and a majesty that was veiled. And he was older, far older. How much older, he wondered. And then he thought how odd it was that he had never thought about it before. Treebeard had said something about wizards, but even then he had not thought of Gandalf as one of them. What was Gandalf? In what far time and place did he come into the world? And when would he leave it? And then his musings broke off, and he saw that Denethor and Gandalf still looked each other in the eye, as if reading the other's mind. But it was Denethor who first withdrew his gaze. Okay? The significance there is that Pippin is only now beginning to see Gandalf as he really is. And he still hasn't yet. He hasn't seen Gandalf the White uncloaked in the way that Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli did when they met with Gandalf in Fangorn. Okay? So, Denethor then asks Pippin to tell him his tale, and Pippin does. And they keep talking. And on page 758, Denethor says to Gandalf, "Let your wrath and an old man's folly run off, and then return to my comfort." And Gandalf says, "Folly? Nay, my lord, when you are a dotard, you will die. You can use even your grief as a cloak. Do you think that I do not understand your purpose in questioning for an hour one who knows the least while I sit by?" Now, Pippin doesn't really seem to understand what Gandalf has just said. Gandalf has said, Pippin doesn't know anything compared to me. And yet you question for an hour him, and you don't ask me a single question. And Denethor replies, "If you understand it, be content. That is, if you know why I haven't asked you any questions, then be content and let it be." And he goes on. "The Lord of Gondor is not to be made the tool of other men's purposes, however worthy. And to him there is no purpose higher in the world as it now stands than the good of Gondor, and the rule of Gondor, my lord, is mine and no other man's, unless the king should come again." Now, what Denethor is saying there is that his sole concern as steward of Gondor is the preservation of Gondor. He doesn't care about anything else. He doesn't care about other lands. He doesn't care about other peoples. All he's concerned with is protecting his kingdom. And he says he is to protect his kingdom and do his best until the Lord should come again. That is, until the king should come again. Gandalf replies then, "Unless the king should come again, well, my lord steward." Notice that. Gandalf doesn't just refer to him as Lord, he qualifies it. Because Denethor is not the king, he is only the steward. He is ruling Gondor in place of another. And so he ought to preserving Gondor in such a fashion that when the rightful king does come, he will find everything in order. "Well, my lord steward, it is your task to keep some kingdom still against that event, which few now look to see. That is, few people expect for a king to return. After all, the king has not been in Gondor for several hundred, if not thousands of years. You have to look in the appendix to find out how long it's been." So Gandalf continues, "In that task you shall have all the aid that you were pleased to ask for. But I will say this, the rule of no realm is mine, neither of Gondor nor any other, great or small." Well, why does he tell Denethor that? Because Denethor is implying through his words that Gandalf seeks rule over Gondor. The same way that Saruman implied that Gandalf seeks power. That Gandalf wants not only his own staff, but the staff of Saruman and the staff of Radagast and the other wizards, and the keys to Barad-dûr and the keys to Orthanc. Okay? The reason Saruman thinks that is because those are things that Saruman wants. Denethor implies this about Gandalf because Denethor is projecting his own desires. He would like the real rule of Gondor. He would love to be king. Gandalf continues, "But all worthy things that are in peril as the world now stands, those are my care. And for my part, I shall not wholly fail of my task, though Gondor should perish. If anything passes through this night that can still grow fair or bear fruit and flower again in days to come. For I also am a steward. Did you not know? Okay. Gandalf says, all worthy things that are in peril as the world now stands, those are my care. Well, what are all worthy things? Not just Gondor. Rivendell, the Shire, Rohan, Lothlorien, all the free peoples of the world and creatures of the world. Gandalf essentially even says, when he says, as for my part, I shall not wholly fail of my task. If anything passes through the night that can still grow fair or bear fruit and flower again in days to come. He's saying, even if everything else is destroyed, and yet through this one calamitous situation of the Dark Lord rising again, if through this night a new day comes and even a single flower lives to bloom, where a tree lives to bloom and blossom and bear fruit, then Gandalf will have succeeded. He will have fulfilled part of his task as a steward. Now, if Gandalf is a steward, the question then arises, not what is he steward of, because he's told us. The question arises, who's the rightful lord? That is, if Gandalf is just an emissary, he's a substitute, a stand-in, who is he the stand-in for? Question you might want to consider. Okay. So Gandalf and Pippin leave. And Pippin tells Gandalf, I did the best I could. And Gandalf says, you did very well. But he does say, that Denethor listened to everything you said, and he read a lot into what you said, and pulled a lot out of what you said. So Pippin goes off. He gets dressed in the livery of the White Tower, and he meets Baragon and his son Birgil, and we're going to skip on to the chapter, The Passing of the Grey Company. Let's see. The bottom of page 777. We see Merry and Theoden talking, and Merry says to him, I have a sword. May I lay the sword of Meriadoc of the Shire on your lap, Theoden King. Receive my service if you will. And the king replies, gladly will I take it. And laying his long old hands upon the brown hair of the hobbit, he blessed him. Rise now, Meriadoc, esquire of Rohan and of the household of Meduseld. Take your sword and bear it unto good fortune. Okay. So now, Merry swears allegiance, fealty if you want, to Theoden, just as Pippin has to Denethor. Okay, we skip a few more pages. And on page is, let's see, bottom of 780 and through 781. We have riders from the north have come, and Aragorn begins to talk about the paths of the dead.